All right. Thank you for that. Good evening, everybody. So going
Evening.
to be we're going to be having a quick conversation today about failing fast versus failing slow and what that essentially looks like in product development, specifically within the African markets. My name is David. I'm the co-founder of a fintech here. It's a very early stage fintech in Kigali called Pebla. And I am joined by Thaya, Monica, and Jason. So I'd like to start off in a clockwise manner. Everybody just introduce themselves, and then we'll jump straight into it. So over to you, Thaya.
All right. Hi, guys. My name is Taya Oronja. I am from Kenya. I have been a four-time co-founder of several startups. Currently, I am a PM at Transion, where we are building an ERP stroke sales omni-channel system, whereby we are able to help African businesses be able to sell faster and manage their business much more efficiently. Glad to be here. Looking forward for this discussion.
Awesome. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jason Masai. I lead product at M-Pesa Africa. I have 13 years experience in product in both banking, telco, and fintech. And I'm looking forward to the conversation. Quite an interesting one.
Yeah. And my name is Monica Wambogo. I have been a product manager now for about 15 years. And really, my experience spans three main industries. One is banking. The other space is really, I'd say, early stage and growth startups. And more recently, I spent the last 5.5 years at Microsoft leading different products in the identity and access management space. So excited to be also having this conversation.
Awesome. So I'm very glad about the caliber of people on the call. Definitely a large mix of, industry. So it's a bit of fintech here, but really just around helping businesses, do better. And so I want to start off with the first question, right? And really unpacking what you actually understood by failing fast versus failing slow, specifically within African markets. What does that mean to you? And I think I'd like to start off with Jason, regard to this question.
Yeah, that's a great question, David. What came to mind, when you talk about failing fast or failing slow? I look at it two ways. So when you look at failing fast, it's essentially how you set up to be able to test quickly, experiment, run small pilots, and especially with the African context in mind, how you're able to identify markets where you can actually learn, get insights very, very quickly, and pivot if you need to, or scale if you need to. Yeah. I mean, it's and then also failing slow. Obviously, it's the flip side of that, where you obviously looking to build for perfection, and most times not necessarily having validated customer adoption. Yeah, so you haven't really validated an idea with customers, to necessarily justify scaling a particular product. So I essentially would say, failing fast is how you're set up to be able to get insights very, very quickly from your customer base and leverage those insights into now how you grow your product or pivot to product. And then obviously there's the other side, where you sort of build for perfection, where you sort of building this big proposition without validating with your customer base.
Okay, that's interesting. Anyone have a slightly different take or want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think I agree with Jason 100%. I think failing fast for me is really just, as he said, how quickly you run pilots. And for me, whenever you're launching anything, whether it's a feature within a product that's already out there or whether it's a brand new product, you're always going to come in with some assumptions. And I think how quickly you validate those assumptions is, for me, really the difference of whether you're going to fail fast or slow. So I feel like failing fast is teams who are really able to quickly validate or invalidate their assumptions, be they about the product itself, about the consumers, about the market, competitors, whoever you're dealing with. Folks who are able to validate that very quickly or invalidate it, then are able to really fail fast.
Awesome. Fire, do you have anything else to add?
Yes, coming from a founder's perspective, I'd say making sure that you spend as less money as possible when you're validating to avoid spending all your savings, right? And also, you see, everyone has an assumption. Everyone has an idea that one day you dreamt about, then you want to now to go ahead and build a business around it, but you need to test out. Mostly, I mean, we all know any decent PM or any decent entrepreneur starts from a problem. We all know the problems, but doesn't mean that there's a business to be built around that problem, right? So the business aspect also has to make sense. And for you to do that, you spend as less money as possible, right? It will be a WhatsApp group. Just start a WhatsApp group for your target audience and, see whether they are willing to pay for your, consultancy business, the small MVP or the small concierge type of MVP. If they do, by all means, you have validated, right? Yeah.
Thank you very much. I actually resonate with that. I'm glad you brought out the perspective of the founder. Everybody here is either doing enterprise on the large scale or something slightly smaller and starting out. So yes, thank you for that perspective. And in light of that, I think it's important to find out what that looks like on both ends of the spectrum. So I want to start off first with enterprise and ask, this is probably going straight to Jason first. How do you balance, moving fast and validating your thesis or whatever hypothesis you have with the responsibility of building trust in products that serve millions of people? And so this is probably speaking more towards your work at M-Pesa. How are you able to do that in a way that doesn't break trust?
That's a great question, David. So for most products, trust is sort of like your currency, which if you break, you sort of make or break the product. Especially in my world where we're sort of digitizing a lot of those services. So the alternatives that customers have are potentially informal, but very well trusted. I mean, an example I could use is cash. Yeah, if for example I'm trying to digitize transactions in a certain vertical, cash is trusted. It's already trusted. So the question is, how am I able to replicate that element of trust in my product? And a number of items come to the fore. Any issue dealing with customer funds, I mean, that's huge on trust. If customers cannot trust that your funds are secure, they're safe, I mean, it breaks that trust in a big way. Security as well, that's another element. How do you trade off and make sure that your platform, your product, your service is as secure as possible, and you are actually able to communicate that to your customers? And sometimes it could even be just a perception of insecurity, not necessarily that it's insecure. Yeah. That could actually make or break whether your product is adopted or not. So identity, how safe is my identity, for example? So those examples come to mind. And for people building in the enterprise side, in the startup side, I think winning customers' trust is the biggest thing you can actually do, to gain or to get validation from customers all about your product, that actually drives adoption. So I think essentially I've just highlighted a few, but the general rule of thumb is identify those elements within your product. It could be different for different products, that actually speak to customer trust, and ensure you sort of have very high guardrails around how you treat such elements. um, and now with regard to building, anything that you're building that touches on identity, security, customer funds, obviously you sort of give it top priority. The focus there should ideally be very high, as opposed to adjacent features which you can move fast and break things if you may. So that's sort of essentially how I think you would sort of work in terms of building trust.
Okay, so if I'm getting you clearly, what you're saying is with regard to issues surrounding safety of their funds, you probably want to fail slower,
Correct.
rather than failing fast just for the
Correct.
sake of innovating. Okay, thank
Correct.
you.
Correct.
Monica, do you want to share a bit more along those lines from an
Yeah, so
identity standpoint?
Yeah, so first of all, I completely resonate with everything that Jason has said. Um, as he mentioned, trust is something very fragile and it takes a long time to build, but it can break very quickly, right? So you definitely want to, be very careful around those things that he has mentioned: security, privacy, anything that could impact the user. But back to your question, I think for me, I look at it as almost like two sides of this whole conversation, right? So you want to move fast, but you don't want to break trust. And it's kind of difficult, right? Because ultimately the whole idea of failing fast is that you're gonna fail, right? So something will go wrong. And so when something does go wrong, then what, right? How can you kind of manage the damage, if I might call it that? I think for me, the first thing is actually something related to what Jason said around having some sort of guardrails or some ways in which you can, I guess, protect yourself, right? And I'd say the first thing that I learned the hard way, for example, when I was working for Microsoft, is just around things like automation, right? So when you're moving fast, and you're trying to, speed is an issue, you cannot be able to probably test every single nook and cranny of your product, right? So sometimes if you don't have automated tests, for example, you are gonna definitely release something and it's gonna fail, not because it's a bad thing, but just because probably you didn't test it right? You might have QA teams or people who are there to test, but they're gonna miss something. So as much as you can automate things like testing or anything else that you think could go wrong, then you're kind of balancing that trust. You're trying to ensure that, if something does go wrong, you limit the damage. So I think that's definitely one thing. I'd say the next thing in terms of like limiting the damage would be go fast, but scale slowly, right? So don't do a huge release, right? Don't release to millions of people, especially when you're still in the experimentation phase. So you might move quickly, but scale slowly. So if you can have some sort of like phased releases, right? So, release to a small group of people, make sure at least it works. And, you've caught the most obvious issues before you then scale over to, more and more people and go further and further, then you're less likely to break trust, because if something does go wrong, it's going to go wrong with a smaller group of people. We used to call, you typically call it friends and family. You start with your friends and family, people who, even if it goes wrong, they're going to forgive you, they're going to forget. And then you scale to, very loyal customers, early adopters, and go like that. So by the time you're going large to a big proportion of your customer base, then at least you've kind of eliminated some of the things that are likely to make you fail. So I think for me, those are the things that I would do to make sure that I kind of balance that trust.
Awesome. Thank you. That's definitely helpful to think about. So picking a small subset of people, releasing to them, and then seeing how they, adopt this, and if anything breaks, and automated testing. Got it. Thank you very much. That's definitely very insightful. So Thaya, um, in the startup, world, I know you don't have as many users in the beginning. What would you say is your approach to building trust, even at the earlier stage, while still experimenting?
Um, Maybe two things I've learned in Africa, while building in Africa or for Africans. And I kept on trying to understand why, when you watch videos from our colleagues in the West, they usually say we scaled within like 2 months, we were doing, like a million MRR. And you're like, what is happening, right? I discovered there is a difference between the market and our markets, right? And also culture. For me, I think culture is the biggest one. What I mean by this is we are very collectivistic as Africans, and that becomes I don't want to use the word tribal, but let me just use it. It could be not tribal in terms of the language that we speak, but as a collective of maybe this nation, the other nation, right? So how you hack such an culture or a market is building relationships before anything else. Just build relationships. That's your moat, for lack of a better word, right? Jason will tell you how M-Pesa just did a number on network effects, basically working with people that are trusted in the community, like shop owners. They were the first agents and other vendors, right? So it's like you're jumping, or you're piggybacking on trust, right? So how you build that trust is building relationships. So I'd say that is one huge thing that I've seen. Build relationships, then you'll be forgiven even if you fail, because for them they'll say, this is our child, we understand them, he's just building something here and there. And over time, he's trying, over time he will succeed, right? So they will hold your hand even as you fail. And not only fail like you're failing and not doing anything about it, but even as you fail forward, right? So I'd say building relationships in Africa is the way to do business. There's no secret. You can do a lot of offers, you can do a lot of this. You will, if the people don't trust you, if they don't know you literally, they haven't seen you or know someone within your organization, yeah, just say goodbye to your 100,000 MRR. Yeah. So
100%. Everything is resonating so well with me because I'm also early stage. In Africa, we don't build business to consumer products. We build business to community. It's B2C, not, and it's definitely the community you have to target. Jason, you seem like you wanted to pitch in um, to that before we move on to the next question.
Yeah, exactly. So I think what Thaya is referring to is, I think context is very, very important. Market context is very, very important in terms of just building trust. And as he's highlighted, one component of a market context is culture. Yeah, that's huge. Language is another. Customer behavior is another. So I think getting a good understanding of the market context or the environment in which the user you're targeting is in is very, very critical. Yeah. So all those elements, whether it's culture, whether it's language, finance, I mean, it really helps. It really helps to actually be able to build that trust. So and that has been very, very critical for us at M-Pesa, because we don't build a one size fits all. Especially with what we do on the digital side, every market is unique, every context is unique, because even the language is different. Kenya Kiswahili, Mozambique Portuguese. I mean, it's and you have to build that in. If you don't, it really affects the trust that you're building, and ultimately whether you fail or you not.
Thank you. Thank you. That was definitely insightful. And now we've spoken a bit more high level about how these things work conceptually. But I would love to really go into the meat and say, hey, can you share probably your experience when it comes to an experiment that didn't quite go as planned, and the key lessons that you took from that failure, whether it was fast or slow, within the context of the African market? Monica?
Yeah, I actually have two examples. I think the first one was a product. I joined an organization that had a product, and it was, I joined when it was just supposed to get out the door. And it was one of those products that fail spectacularly, with it fails with flying colors. And I think just to summarize, it was basically an edtech product. So it was targeting high school students here in Kenya in particular. And it was basically meant to provide them with, content in line with the curriculum, right? So if somebody is in, let's say, your first year, your second year, third year, or fourth year of high school, you get content in line with that. You get lessons and you get assessments. I think the reason why that product failed is because of something that Jason actually mentioned, and I think Thaya also mentioned it, around market context, right? Not really understanding the people you're building for, or even the market itself. For example, in this particular case, the key persona was a student, right? And this student is somebody who spends, at least in Kenya at the time, 9 out of the 12 months of the year in a boarding school. Majority of the students are in boarding schools. During that time, they don't have access to phones, at least legally, right? They're probably going to have a few that they sneak in. But, majority of the schools in Kenya at the time did not allow students to have phones. So already the key persona has no way of using this product, at least 9 out of 12 months in a year, right? And then also the fact that most students did not see the phone as something that they could learn from. They'll see the phone and they'll think, oh, I need to call someone. It's not, they'll not look at the phone and think, I need to revise using my phone. they'll probably think, I need to call, or I need to, play a game or something like that, right? So the device also just wasn't the right one. And so pretty much in summary, the product just failed. And I think what I learned from that experience is, first of all, I felt like, going into that, I was personally surprised that, I think a lot of that hadn't been factored in terms of like how is the user gonna use this? How is the student actually sitting in a classroom in a typical high school in Kenya gonna use this, right? I don't think enough research had gone into actually finding that. And I think a lot of times as product people, as entrepreneurs, we have a product that we like or we want, and we really want to launch it, right? So we are looking for information to support confirmation bias. We're looking for information to support our idea that this thing will work, even when we might have conflicting evidence. So for me, I feel like, if you're launching a product or a feature, just make sure you do enough user research, have an open mind. Even if you do research and at the end of the day, it's like this thing is not going to work, you cut your losses, you stop it and you cut your losses early on, rather than really holding on to something that at its core won't work. And then later on, you'll spend a year, 2 years building something that, ultimately won't work. So I think that's the main lesson I learned from that.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you. Um, Jason, do you have one at the enterprise scale?
Yes. So I was actually building a wallet product in a bank. And we really built out a very successful credit proposition. And the question was, what next? So we thought obviously savings, sort of is like the logical progression in terms of building out the value proposition. So initially what we did, we just put out a secondary wallet, which essentially was just a wallet where you could pack your funds. And we sort of came up with an X amount of return in terms of the investments that you would get from the savings. I mean, it was in a bank, so I think the thinking was just give consumers just an additional wallet for them to park their funds there and give them a return. Unfortunately, it never worked out. And over a period of time, we started asking ourselves, what could be the problem here? So what we did is we actually talked to customers, existing customers, and told them, how do you do your savings? What would motivate you to put your money in a savings wallet? And what the insights which came out were very, very interesting. Customers wanted to save with a purpose. Customers wanted some level of engagement during their savings journey. And essentially that gave birth to a goal savings product proposition. So essentially what we did is we pivoted from just having a secondary wallet where you could park your savings and get X amount of return, and build out a goal savings proposition where for you to actually start out the savings journey. We actually wanted to ask you, what do you want to save for? Is it for a trip? Is it for a new laptop, etc.? And build out some level of engagement. So do you want to save monthly? Do you want to save weekly? Do you want to save daily? And put in some nudges along those timelines to be able to just encourage you during your savings journey. So again, insights were very, very critical. What we did in the first attempt at that product, I think a lot of assumptions going to come into play when you're building product, and we had not validated those assumptions. But actually now, talking to customers and just hearing, how do you do savings? How would you like to do savings? And building those insights into that savings proposition really, really helped with adoption and customer engagement. So it was not just adoption of the savings proposition, but also how customers engaged were on our platform. So that was, an example which really, really stood out for me.
Awesome. Thank you. So, yeah, we've got great examples of product failures and, the insight that was gotten from what I'm hearing. Speak to your customers, especially early on, and also, do your research and have the mom test. It's a popular book. Do it and figure out if they just say they like it. Do not try to confirm your own biases. And in regard to failure, I think my next question is pivoting, and this one is directed at Thea. Sorry. Um, so my question is, what early signals do you think the PM or the product team in of itself should look out for when it's time to pivot or shut down an initiative? And does this vary on the continent of Africa? Do you find that it's more qualitative than quantitative? Where would you place that balance? How do you actually go about that? What have you done?
That's a very loaded question. Um, but I'll try to. Mhm. So I'd say this is how I make decisions. And are they paying? One, are they paying? Because this is a business, right? At the end of the day, you have to pay salaries. You have to, as a PM now, I have to, my KPIs or my basically how I am drawing out the product is based on the business requirements, or the stakeholders or the founders. They want a certain direction based on the business that they had, the business case, really. So one, are they paying? And two, are there enough people to sustain your burn rate? For example, what I mean is how many how many willing how many paying customers do you think the market has? You could get only maybe one enterprise. If you're billing for enterprise, you might just get two, and they are not paying enough for you to pay your salaries, and that business cannot be sustainable, right? For B2C, and not the community that you said, David, customer, or C2B, whichever the case, do you have enough people that are willing to pay, right? So for me, fundamentally, I start at the business validity of your product, right? Why I say that is value at this day and age, the most fundamental aspect of value is money. There is no other way how you can identify value. Of course, there are many, but you can say time, right? But when it comes to commitment, money comes into play. So I'd say, are they paying? Two, is the market large enough? You could build, or also the trends. You are building something, yet the government has come up with a regulation that says your industry needs to change on how it does things, and maybe that's where you used to get money. You used to be a broker between person A to person B, right? Then the government comes in and becomes maybe the middleman, or just change. certain changes in how things are done. For example, maybe someone remember during COVID, a lot of businesses started and a lot of businesses closed, right? So there are several things that, like travel tech during COVID was, and yeah, it wasn't the business to start because no one was traveling, such things. So I'd say validity, how big is the market, and also changes in industry. For example, there are so many businesses that were helping students to learn or do exams. I mean, ChatGPT just came and swept, swept like an entire industry, right? So such things will make you see that we actually need to close, honestly. Yeah. And it is not a bad thing. I mean, it's just part of business and life. Things start and things end. Life starts and eventually life will end. And that is, it won't be the end of the planets. It will just, there's a continuation. So yeah.
That's very interesting. And so I use in that manner saying if you don't have immediate product market fit where the value is immediately obvious to the end user and they're paying for it, you just shut it down. Is that your assertion?
Immediate, yes. Remember, the needs might change eventually. For example, let me just let me use an example. We in 2018, I built, again, I think in Kenya, we have all tried our nick in the fintech space. So I built a wallet again. So my target, or our target, or the personas that we were, building for were, one, students and university students, and also active mothers. Now, we started with the university students. Now, I want you to imagine that you're building for someone who will be a student for like 4 years, right? So how sustainable is the business model? You see? So, I mean, you can always pivot later on, but are you sure you will suit their needs once they transition from being a student to, maybe in Africa it's jobless, right? Will you still service them once they become jobless? Remember, so for context sake, we were trying to help them manage their finances much better, right? They were able to budget, all that, savings as a group, as an individual, and money was flowing to their wallets because parents were sending money. Now, when they are no longer in school, who is putting money in their wallets? Exactly. So things will change. So again, as you said, yes, if there is no immediate product market fit, by all means, and also how long, customer life value, yes, how long? 4 years is a very small time. So yeah.
All right, interesting. Does anyone have a slightly different opinion in that regard, or do you all believe that, you know what, if it's not making money from day one, exit here on the continent?
Yeah, so maybe I think the context is also critical to understand for, I think for enterprise products. I think you have some, your structure is a bit, I mean, you have a lot of buffer, behind you. So ideally you can buy some time, and the exact example I gave was a good case in point. You can actually buy some time to pivot, and actually find out why isn't it working. Probably, I know in the startup environment, the scenario is very, very different. But depending on your context, I think in an enterprise setup, you do have some leeway to actually, go back to the drawing board and see, what did you miss from a customer perspective? What insights did you miss? Or it could be that it's an experience issue, for example. The experience is terrible and you just need to fix the experience. And that could get you going. Um, I think the context is very, very important in terms of, what wiggle room do you have to be able to pivot. Unfortunately, in some startups environment, that is not the case. But I think in some enterprise environments, you do have the wiggle room to be able to, go back to the drawing board, engage customers, get insights and pivot. Um, I think we have, very, very excellent examples of, product which pivoted still in the startup environment. And right now they are, world-class products. So I think also in that context, if you do have that, if your burn rate isn't that high and you have, some cash reserves, I think there is an opportunity for you to see how you can pivot.
Okay. Thank you, Jason. Monica, do you have anything else to add?
Not really. Maybe one last comment I could make here, as Jason and Taya were speaking, I was thinking about it. I think it took me a long time to realize that killing a product is not a negative thing, or failure in this particular case is not typically a bad thing. So, a lot, especially as Taya was talking about the science, right? I have had instances in my career where my goal was just to kill something. Like you're not looking at how are we going to grow the numbers, how are we going to make sure we have more users. You're actually figuring out how am I going to make sure this number goes to zero. Like I don't want anybody using this product. And I know it feels a bit unnatural because then you're like, oh my goodness, it doesn't feel like it's failure in any situation doesn't feel good. But I'd say immediately you see those signs that we have just spoken about, the nobody's paying, as Taya was saying, some stagnation, over whatever period of time you can, right? In the enterprise space, it might be like you might have a longer period. But sometimes it might be a year, 2 years, however long, and then you're like, you know what, this thing is not gonna work, right? We've been stagnating for years. And so maybe we just need to kill this and it's fine. So yeah, I think it's just getting comfortable with failure and getting even comfortable with being like, okay, we're going to kill this thing. We're going to kill this product and move on, either entirely to something different. If we can't pivot within the same space, we could even move completely to a new space. And it takes a bit of practice to kind of get comfortable with that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. Very diverse perspectives all on the same thing. There's the enterprise versus startup play happening, and I love it. This is what this conversation is all about. Okay, so you've decided to kill a product. Now you're at a crossroads, right? You've decided, okay, now I'm going to kill this product. How do you kill the product and not kill your career? How do you communicate failure to stakeholders, whether it's an executive, whether it's an investor, whether it's users? How do you not damage, the confidence in you as the PM and or your team? Because it's very real and it's hard. I think in other cultures they are generally like, oh, there's the move fast and break things culture. I don't know if that's the same thing on the African continent. So I would definitely love to hear your perspective, especially for those that have worked for African enterprise companies, foreign, enterprise companies, and also local startups. So this is all over the place, but I would definitely love to hear your perspective in this regard. Thaya, you look like you're itching, so you go for it.
Aha. Well, um, two things come to mind. One is it's only right if you started tracking things as early as possible. Why I say this is there's nothing as bad as not knowing why you failed. Just it's like you vanished out of thin air. You just disappeared out of, it's like you are swallowed by earth, right? Knowing exactly where you failed or what happened. And I'm not saying so that you can blame that thing, but at least you know what killed you or who killed you, right? For again, me using the COVID example, we can always say it was COVID that killed my travel tech startup, right? We couldn't pay people for like a whole year, yet there was no business. That is tangible, right? It was this or it was the other one. So tracking from day one helps you even to pivot because now you have numbers. Like we had targeted this market, but it seems like, oh, we had targeted this persona, but it seems like this other persona is the one that is really using our product and paying for our product, right? That way you can justify pivoting, and that way you can justify killing it. Like there needs to be, Jeff Bezos says, instead of, so for him, how he does, if someone comes with an idea, and maybe a senior person needs to kill that idea, the senior person has to come up with reasons why not to do it, because that's how he supports or encourages innovation in Amazon. So I'd say having numbers to back the killing or the it helps even to have a conversation with the stakeholders and to tell them, look, you see the numbers, you see this, you see that, maybe there's a pivot opportunity here, so let's go to this side and kill this other side, right? It's a easier conversation. But if you have no numbers, you have no metrics, you have nothing, it's like chaos. So you'll just be killing and starting and killing and starting and killing, and with no direction. So I'd say tracking helps in having those conversations much later when things don't go as you had planned, right? So yeah.
Okay, thank you, Jason.
I think I could give an example of how some organizations have managed to build an environment where it's okay, very much okay, to kill a product. Case of Revolut. So they essentially, before they scale anything, they essentially have this what they call new bets. An agile squad that is called new bets, and this squad will essentially test an idea, prototype it rapidly, in terms of just to be able to find out, does it work for this, segment X, Y, etc. before they can actually now, scale it. And in that environment, they actually, they kill a lot of ideas because they essentially have tested hypotheses, looked at the numbers, and, they've seen it can't scale. I think Google, I mean, there's, a lot of stories on, the graveyard that Google has of products that they've killed. Okay. For such big organizations, they've sort of created a methodology or an environment where it's actually very safe to kill a product. However, in some context, it may not be that easy. Yeah. So as you said, how do you keep your job when you're trying to say you failed? Yeah. I think the most important thing, I think it's what I was saying. What did you learn from the failure? What was the lesson? What was the insight? I think that is very, very critical. Um, and then it touches on something else like, your storytelling. Um, how do you tell your story in a way that shows value to the organization, even though it's a failure? Okay. In the sense that you could say, this product failed because of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which are insights which we could actually leverage on other products, a new product, etc. Okay, so I think there are other sort of components in how well do you tell your story. Because there's one person who could just say, the product failed. But then there's another person who could say, I actually learned that my customers prefer XYZ. Same scenario, but the pitch, the positioning is very, very different. So for me, it's what lesson do you take away? What learnings do you take away that can actually help you in your next product, personally, even for the organization? I think the learnings you take away from failure is very, very important. And again, to some extent, it's we call it school fees you're paying for from the University of Life. That actually helps you to become a better product manager. And even how you position it to the organization, I think there's always value in actually now communicating this is how not to do a product, and so on and so forth. So I think positioning is very critical, your storytelling is very critical, but I think ultimately is what lessons did you take, what insights did you take, what learnings did you take from that failure?
Thank you. Um, Monica, do you want to close it off?
Yeah. I think Jason and Thaya have spoken a lot about that, and I think, as they've said, focus on the lesson. What lesson have you learned, right? And also just being honest, right? Don't sugarcoat stuff. Just be like plain old. Um, this is what happened. Don't sugarcoat anything. And I've also found that if you're built with whoever your stakeholders are, if you're regularly talking to them, then the failure is not a surprise, right? Nothing really catches them by surprise because they've been looking at the numbers over time. And so they kind of know or already agree with you in terms of the direction that you decide to take. So I think maintaining that open line of communication with whoever your stakeholders are is important.
Awesome. So if I'm getting you clearly, there are three primary things that have come up. One, start early. Start way before the product fails. Start with the data. You need to be pulling data on what's happening. Two, communicate effectively and consistently all the time. Keep them in the loop about what's happening. And three, close off with insights if need be. If you need to close off with insights. What are the key learnings, and how does this affect the direction we are trying to go in as a company? So we are about to end the call. The session was very, very insightful. But before we do, I want to remind everybody on the call that the Inspire Africa conference is happening here in Kigali, and the seats are really filling up fast. So please grab your tickets. As you can see, there's a banner down below. Just go to www.inspireafricaconference.com and you should be able to get yourself a ticket. It's really about Africa and understanding what we should be doing from the product perspective, and specifically in the age of AI. So don't miss out on this. Top CPOs from all over the continent will be here, just like the caliber of people you see in front of me. And so please don't miss out on that. So to close us off in a minute, um, what would you say to product managers around failure? What would your advice be? What should their attitude be, or what would you say in general to them? What advice would you leave for any product manager watching this? If there's any, yeah, word of the day is killing products. Yes, it is. What advice would you leave for any product managers along these lines? I think it's a topic that doesn't get spoken about enough. But yeah, please do feel free to go in any order.
Yeah, I think for me, it's something I actually saw this week on LinkedIn that I really resonated with. Somebody shared a quote, and I'm going to read it. Multi-pivot journeys are the norm and not the exception. So I really, really resonate with that in terms of, pivoting is not like an exception or, a privilege of the few. It is the norm. Everybody has to pivot and multiple times, not just once. So thanks.
Yeah, so I think for me, what I would say is first, I think just building on the last question, I think the reality is in some organizations, failure is not really readily accepted. Um, and I think for you, what you can take away personally is what do you learn, and how can you take that forward in terms of helping you to hone your craft better. Yeah. I think that's very, very important, especially the reality is in some organizations, failure is not, one of the best things you can sort of put at the table. But then also, I believe you're also talking to product leaders. My, you know, comment would be, let's be comfortable with failure. Let's build an environment where our teams feel comfortable saying that something failed, and let's help see how we help them to be able to draw learnings from those failures. Because oftentimes I think we celebrate wins, because in my view, I think you fail, I think you learn more than someone who's won, has had more wins, because you actually have a different perspective than someone who's kept on winning or getting things right. So how are we able to celebrate failure? I know it's an anti-pattern, but how do we celebrate failure as much as we celebrate wins, and create an environment and a culture that our product managers, especially for product leaders, can be comfortable sharing failure, but most importantly, sharing what they learned from their failure. I think that's very, very important. So I think to product managers, how best can you learn from a failure, but also for product leaders, let's create an environment where, failure is a plus and not necessarily, something to be frowned upon.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Thea. Final words.
I really resonate with what Monica and Jason have said. I have I don't know whether it's a philosophy. I usually like saying that you are as good as how much you failed. Meaning, you might have gotten lucky with your successes. And what do you learn from getting lucky? You learn nothing. It's just, you are just lucky, right? But when you fail, you are able to see red flags from afar. And I don't mean in the context of relationships, as everyone is used to. You see, in product, you can always tell, maybe another startup is starting similar to yours, and they are using the same strategy that you use. They are using the same, and you can tell, I can see you guys going under. And you are of use to maybe a fellow PM in the industry, because now you have failed, right? So my parting shot will be, when you fail, please make it less expensive. Try as much as possible to make it less expensive. And I don't mean only money, and I also mean time, right?
Mhm.
That's my parting shot. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming on the call. Multiple pivots are the norm. We need to celebrate failure a lot more. And when you fail, definitely go on to learn from it and share with other people coming up um, along the ladder. Thank you all. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Thea. Thank you, Monica. It's been lovely, and I look forward to seeing you in Kigali very soon. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.
Yes. Cheers. Thank you.
Bye.